Welcome to Talk Design Podcast, the space where creativity meets conversation. I'm Adrian Ramsey, your host, and as someone deeply entrenched in the world of design, I'm thrilled to introduce you to the minds that inspire me in the hope that they will spark something special within you too. From a design past crafting women's swimwear to pushing the boundaries of performance sportswear, from mountaineering to international yachting, to implementing systematic innovation solutions that transcend boundaries in aerospace industry. My heart remains rooted in architecture, and exploring the emotional tapestry woven by built spaces is my fascination. My journey in design has been what can only be described as a life of design. I want to thank you for lending me your ears. I'm eager to embark on this next episode together. And for those of you who prefer to watch and listen, you can catch this episode at YouTube. That's youtube.com/@TalkDesignPodcast. My guests on Talk Design today are a couple of guys from Canada that have Beachman, and Beachman makes like motorcycles. And I want to take you through the process with them of how they got this started. And then also, a lot of you may know them really well from their Instagram handle, which is Beachman Life. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, because it's got a really wonderful vibe, retro, the whole feel of a free life. I would be my sort of description of it. So I have Ben, Taylor, and Steve Payne from Beachman here with me, and we're going to dig in and discover the story. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. I want to start out with just the simple part first. Like, tell us a bit about each of you, and then also where your passions lie and how you kind of collided to do this together. Because, you know, there was some point that you went, you know what, we could do this. And that entrepreneurial journey that got you started in there. Who's going first?
Great. I'll start it off chronologically. That starts with me. So Steve and I met in 2019, but Beachman as just the brand idea, so not the bikes, existed since about 2016. So 2016, I started Beachman Life, that Instagram page, and I just knew it was what I liked. I wanted to make some brand someday that focused on, reviving the dedication to craft and style that existed and, was so prominent in the 50s and 60s and 70s, kind of before planned obsolescence and, rampant consumerism kind of took over. And so, yeah, I started the Instagram with some idea in mind. I wanted to make, everyday good products essentially that just applied the same design concept, which is take all the, we have the advantage living in the 2020s of filtering out all the best parts and the best lessons and the warmest memories of that period of design, and getting rid of all the stuff that didn't work, all the weird, wacky stuff they were doing back then.
Well, there was a lot of discovery and a lot of innovation that happened through that time in the world, post-war.
Absolutely.
Just everything was on a grow, and America and North America was certainly, leading the way with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, definitely, I think that I'm Beachman, but I was thinking about when I was making the page about how there's a lot of pages on Instagram that are like the gentleman lifestyle, but they're that kind of like British James Bond tuxedos and Hugo Boss cologne and, I'm better than you because I have a lot of money kind of vibe. And I was like, okay, what is the opposite? What is the American James Bond? He would just be hanging out, having a pina colada on the beach. It's like when James Bond, when he's done being a spy, right? He goes and does that. And so I was like, that's what I want to talk about is the Beachman instead of the gentleman. It's the more relaxed. It's when they're having their time off. And So I kind of built it around that. And then I started trying to develop some products. Most prominently was a watch design that I was working on. I
Uh-huh.
actually have it. I know we won't be able to see it on the
Oh, but you
podcast, but I
can,
can show it to you,
no, will you show it?
Adrian.
Definitely. Bring it right up to the screen. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so this
cool.
guy right here, so it's made out of two different kinds of cherry wood, dark and light.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, the idea I wanted to do a wood watch that was, just using these older materials and stuff like that. And so I worked on them for a while, but I ran into this design problem that wood expands and contracts. And
Yeah.
after about a year, all the numbers and dials will start falling off the face. And I tried to reconcile that with the factory I was working with, but I couldn't get to a place where it was light. I didn't want to go to a metal bottle because it was so
Uh-huh.
nice and light, but I couldn't figure out that durability. So I shelved the project and just kind of continued on with the Instagram working. I was also in my early 20s trying to figure out my career and stuff, and just kind of put it on the back burner. And then a few years later, I moved back to Toronto, and I had started thinking about doing a Beachman bike, essentially a moped, a 50cc gas
Yep.
cafe racer. I had seen a guy in a forum online. He had built a little moped into a cafe racer for his son to ride in university. And I thought, wow, that is the coolest dad ever. That is the coolest thing you could possibly have at university as a young guy. I'd love to make that a mass produced product and do it under Beachman. So I put together a deck, but I had no idea like how to produce this. I had no understanding of motorcycle design or engineering or how to use a wrench. I went to film school, so I had just
Oh,
that
okay. I was gonna
training.
say, so you were at film school and yeah, right. So if you were at film school and you're going, I've got all these like ideas around what it needs to be. I like the way you said you put together a deck on it so you knew where you were headed, like in the visual and excitement side of the marketing of it. Then you had to find the
Hmm.
product that worked with it or make the product that
Yeah,
worked with it. That's cool.
exactly. Because I owned a crappy little moped when I lived in Vancouver, but it broke down all the time, and I'd be trying to clean out the carburetor like on the side of the road going to work, and it was just such a nuisance. So I sold the thing. I couldn't figure out how to fix it for good, like Steve was
Yeah.
able to. So I just got rid of it, but I kept that dream of that first day when I bought it. All my friends came over and we were just riding up and down my street having a blast. And yeah, and so when I came to Toronto, an old friend of mine had become a barista on the end of my street.
Yeah.
And then he messages me one day and says, "Hey, you have a neighbor named Steve. His wife is coming in here every day to get coffee, and she's telling me that he builds cafe racers in his backyard. And yeah, here's his phone number. Just send him a text, and you guys should link up and tell him your idea." So I think here is a good time for Steve to rewind now, uh, back to how you got into bikes and all that. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that bit of the story, like how, it's funny. Well, how the things collide eventually, but also the fact that I want to go, got a friend who says, you don't manifest things, you take manifest action. You actually make things happen. So you have a thing. So by building the deck and all those things, you started to put it into, I want to say the universe, or I've got another great friend and she calls it the Godiverse. You actually started to put the energy there. So then that your RAS, reticular activating system actually starts to look for these things in the world and it starts to take you on the line of it. And usually it comes when you've written it down, been precise, like you said, built a deck, done the thing. I think it's really cool.
mhm.
Really, really cool.
Yeah, and it also you get people around you, right? Like
Hmm.
it wasn't me that connected to Steve, it was a friend, but by putting it out there in the world, everyone is aware like this guy's on this journey, and so it becomes a thing that's top of mind. And
Uh-huh.
like without doing that, if I hadn't met Steve, I would have some crappy job in advertising right now, I think. So,
Yeah,
um,
right. That's really interesting. Steve, take it from there, man. Your wife was spending a fortune on hot chocolates and cafe lattes, and you needed to build races to get that bill paid. Tell us about that.
Yeah, basically going back a little while, like I was a child of the 70s, so that sort of design of the bikes was kind of built into my being anyway. It's funny that Ben was a film guy because I worked in audio for doing sound for TV for like almost 20 years or something.
Oh, right.
My backyard hobby was motorcycles. I went to motorcycle school in my early 20s, like to become a mechanic, and I actually couldn't get a job. I was trying to get an apprenticeship. I traveled all over the province, and just nobody was hired. If you didn't have an in, you just couldn't get in. So maybe after like 6 or 8 months of looking, I just kind of just called it and went to school for audio. But the whole motorcycle thing, it just kind of turned. I had the knowledge, and it's funny. The first bike I think I bought to take apart literally was in the middle of February, like minus 20-degree weather. I stripped this bike down in this broken down barn because a chain or something had come loose inside the engine or something, and that sort of got me hooked on doing that at home type thing. It was like, well, if I can do this, I can do whatever. And just over the years, kind of always sort of had a motorcycle going. Never necessarily did custom stuff, but just always had them.
Yeah.
Mostly sort of in the same style as the Beachmans, kind of classic Honda sort of style.
Sort of 70s, 70 or 80s bikes, that kind of style.
Yeah, that's kind of what sticks with me.
Yep.
For the most part, in terms of the origin of that type of frame and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for years I worked in TV. I sort of converted my garage to started buying bikes. I was doing cars for a while, but they're way bigger and heavier and harder to store. And then it was just like, well, motorcycles, I could have 2 or 3 going and have tons of room to do it. And I just kind of converted my garage into a space to sort of build those out. I started a YouTube channel for a while to sort of document everything. I enjoyed watching other guys doing it, and I thought, well, I might as well. And because my audio work was at home, I basically set up my garage as sort of the bike building space, and in behind it I had a fully sort of set up recording studio. So I would just kind of go between the two, between sort of my day job and my other day job.
Yeah, right.
Type thing. So the evolution just became natural, that I just started doing more and more custom stuff with bikes, in terms of just what eventually sort of became the first production bike for Beachman. And through all that building, sort of built my own little recipe. And I would build them and just sell them. Just when they were done, just put them up on the local classifieds.
I was about to say, so yeah, you
get a few bucks to pay for the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'd make a decision on what you were making, and then you would go, this is what I'm going to make out of this thing, and away you'd go and do it, and then, as you say, just sell that one off.
Yeah, and it gets you to experiment. Yeah, you can experiment with different ways of doing it, and even sort of, we'll talk about Bike Zero, but in that there's like the seat is an old skateboard deck type thing, which was an old cafe racer trick, right, to get the flip up at the end. Right. Yeah, so when Ben sort of got the call from his buddy, I had sort of, I think it was probably a couple of good years into doing, I'd probably done 10, 15 bikes at that point.
Right.
And and then came the introduction through Tom at the coffee shop. So literally Ben and I were one street away from each other, probably a 45-second walk.
Yeah. Wow.
When Tom sort of did the introduction.
And then what made you decide that it was worth stopping what you were doing to work with Ben, and then vice versa, like Ben going, well, I can work with this guy. There's that thing that happens where you both have the great idea, but you've both got to have a skill set that you bring to it, or so you both got when you align your vision, and then you've got to align your values. How did that sort of come together with both of you as you took the journey? Because once, that sort of first dating excitement is over, you've actually got to do the work.
Yeah, it was a like it was a soft start. Like our
Yeah.
first meeting was at that coffee shop. We basically sat down, and it's funny that you were talking about how you put things out into the universe and they come together. Within 5 minutes of us meeting each other, we realized we had a lot of similar friends in common. Just by the weirdest kind of connections. He brought up something in his family, and I went, "Oh, a buddy of mine did it at that place," and he went, "Well, I worked for that guy," and it was very much within about 5 seconds we were like, "Okay, we're both on the same level here."
I think there's a fascinating thing with that, where, if you've got like a dog, I don't know if either of you've got dogs or had dogs, but I used to own an Airedale Terrier. And so it's kind of like a boxy looking thing that belongs on Tintin, but bigger. And with this Airedale Terrier, we would take it for a walk in the park, and it would see other dogs and it would be bouncing around. It would see another Airedale Terrier, and its tail would just like wag like double the speed. It would know that it had seen its own breed. It would be off to play with it. It would be, a completely different setup than it would have been any other dog. So even other dogs that, they liked each other, the difference between their Airedale Terrier, if it was the same breed, the dog would look and go, bang, I'm with you. I'm with you. Let's go. Let's do it. We're the same. And I always think of this when I meet people like, you're saying about, when there's all these weird synchronicities that all line up. I always think of the dog, like you go, oh, wow, hold on. I found one of mine. I found a live one, and I can imagine that happening when you're going, really? Wow, my buddy did this, or wow, this happened. And, then there's all these synchronicities that all line together. Maybe that's how you know when it's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you met, you found this kind of history piece, and then what happened next? How did you decide to make it happen from there?
Yeah. So the next thing that happened was, so it's funny, you're talking about, like the terrier moment. Like,
yeah.
So we have this chat at the coffee shop, and I had this deck showing the bike, and I had the picture of that bike I had found in the forums the dad had built. And then Steve's looking at me and goes, yeah, this is really good, but I've been importing e-bikes from China and messing around with them and kind of know their capabilities. And I think this should be electric if we do it. And like, I'm pretty sure she said that like right in the first few minutes of us sitting down. And because that was the piece I was missing from mine. And it was always about accessibility, Adrian. Like when I started in BC, the moped that I had in British Columbia of Canada, you only need a driver's license to drive a moped. You don't need any kind of motorcycle certification. I didn't realize that's not the case for most of the country. It's only like that in 2 of the provinces. And so when I came back, there was that extra roadblock of like, well, if I make an electric moped, people have to get their license. You might as well just buy a highway speed motorcycle. It's all the same amount of work. So Steve not only kind of created this feature facing idea, but also the e-bike allowed us to make this like really low barrier to entry for people getting into riding on 2 wheels. And so anyway, so what happened next is we're sitting down, he pitches that idea. And then we go to his house, go and look at the bikes he's been building so we can chat about like immediately making a prototype. And that, I think, Adrian, is the thing that connects Steve and I the most, is he and I are absolutely like risk takers, but also the affirmative action that you said about, what did you say? Like it's
manifest action.
Manifest action. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when an opportunity, even a risky one, is presented to either Steve or myself, we don't question it or worry about it. We just immediately start figuring out a plan. Okay, how do we do this? So we go from the coffee shop to his house. He's going to start showing me his motorbike frames. And that studio that he described, where we walk in, Steve's got an old Volkswagen bus that he restored and put a Subaru engine in. And then 3 cafe racers on the build. And then he opens the door into the sound studio. I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Like,
exactly.
This is amazing. This is exactly Beachman, And
all you're thinking about is how you move in. Yeah.
Yeah, and how freaking cool his wife is to let him have this whole setup.
Yeah,
So,
right. Yeah, she's
um,
the gold. She's the gold.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, man, we start chatting, and Steve very quickly had the bones of this bike that he built into Zero there, and kind of presented his idea to me. And I think, Steve, it's better for you to take this next couple years of development.
Yeah. So I had just acquired a mass of different bike frames and everything else through it. So I think what I had there was the leftover frame of a Kawasaki, like a 1970s Kawasaki 200cc bike,
Yeah.
and it just, and there was no motor or no engine, no gas engine per se. It was literally just a frame, maybe some shocks, maybe the front wheel type
Yeah,
thing.
cool.
And so it was like the decision was made to just kind of like maybe we can make this into something, put the motor on it, build a battery from scratch, just put whatever bits and pieces we can put together, but then also keep in mind sort of the styling, sort of, like the cafe racer kind of stripped down kind of, bare bones bike that, and that's kind of good into our production model. That's kind of where we kept with it, right? It's the bike that you turn your stock, bike into, right?
Yes.
You do all the strip down, you take off all the bits and pieces. In the case of a gasoline engine, you pull out the airbox and you put on, pod filters, which gives it that open frame sort of design. Now in our bikes, we have none of that. So that open frame design kind of comes naturally, but that's kind of where that went. So yeah, I don't remember the exact circumstances in which it was, but I think I just started ordering parts and building batteries and building the bike. At that point, we had no company connection or whatever.
Yeah.
It was basically building it, but to help finance the thing, I basically just asked Ben to just buy it for the price of parts.
Right.
So that just, so that we could sort of share the bankrolling of, the prototype, so to speak.
So I bought that bike off him for $2,000, which I think is the best deal I'll ever get on anything. The original Beachman prototype.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And luckily you have never sold it. You've still got it, of course. Yeah. It'll never be sold. Yeah.
Yeah, I still ride it every day. Yeah.
Oh, really? It's your daily ride. I love it. So if the whole business thing had gone west on you guys, you'd still have a cool bike to ride.
Oh, yeah.
And a timber watch to wear. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so then you've got this bike and, like, how do you go from that bike to actually ending up in a production model and forming a company and those kind of pieces to it? Like what, all the time, all this time that's going by, are we talking months, weeks, a year? Like what are we talking in time frame?
Not an incredible amount of time. There was some design work. I don't know the exact order of things, but we definitely sat down with sort of a 3D design guy to start hashing out some of the details of what it was. I was kind of, it was one of those things where we would chat about it, and I think, when Ben had the prototype, he could go out and sort of sell it as, the prototype of something further to come. My time a lot was spent literally just kind of trying to find parts that I could use for production, right? Because I was so used to just buying an old bike and then stripping parts off and throwing them in a bucket. And when I needed some special bolt or bracket, you just dig through the bucket, find what you need and put it on. How can you turn that into actual production? Right. So my time was spent kind of just trying to find parts and different, like what frames would work and sort of that thing, at the same time working with a designer to see if we, do we make something from scratch, from custom? Like what's the best route to sort of take with that? But I don't think it was a very long time at all.
So I should say it, like the timeline, Adrian, from the first day Steve and I met to the first day that we sold a bike to a person was about 20 months. It was just under 2 years.
Yeah.
And so that also includes COVID, right? Because Steve and I met in 2019, and I think we met like, I feel like it was kind of like late summer or something when we met, and then went into by the winter of 2019, Steve built the bike. No, it was 2020 because it was COVID.
2020. Yeah.
I had moved into a new place in October of 2020. That was
Yeah.
when Steve finished Zero. It was rideable first day. And he finished it in like November, and it was frigid. Here, it's Canada. It was like, I think it was like a freak cold wave had come, and it was like minus 15 degrees Celsius or
The
something
little
ridiculous.
Arctic blast coming down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had to ride the bike across Toronto, which is a huge city.
Yeah.
And uh, I have like a motorcycle kit on, and like adequate protections, but I had those little thin cotton gloves that you get at like a corner store.
Yeah.
And I remember I pulled over, and I kept buying another pair and putting them on, and buying another pair and putting them on, so I didn't get like, frostbite on my fingers getting across the whole city. But I got it to my place. And so during COVID, that was when, everyone was huddled at home. So yeah, Steve and I were pretty split up. We lived across the city. He was looking at sourcing. And for the beginning phase, for the first year or so, we were looking at importing parts and building them one by one in Steve's garage, or getting a warehouse or something.
Yeah.
The problem that we faced was that when you're buying individual parts, the minimum orders are really high, and we had no leverage. And so we kept hitting these roadblocks of, maybe not trusting people, or they didn't trust us. And so eventually what happened was Steve found a factory that was building, I don't know if they were e-bikes, they were like e-mopeds, right? Like kind of for the Asian market, built on an old Honda frame, the CB125. And I don't know, Steve, if you want to take it from there, but this kind of like first order that we made after that.
When you say you found an old Honda, well, sorry, yeah, a factory that was producing that, was that in Canada or was that in Asia?
No, so this was in China. And
okay, cool. Yeah.
And so like essentially the product that we found it didn't look anything like a Beachman. But Steve noticed the frame was exactly the same as, there's this bike called the CG125 that Honda produced in the 70s and 80s that they discontinued. And
I remember the bike. Because I'm from the 70s and 80s. Yeah, I remember the bike.
It's the Toyota Helix of motorcycles, right? It's sold in every country. They're invincible. They're all still around. And even to this day, a lot of companies in China and India, in South America, they build bikes on this frame. And Honda they discontinued the platform, and then just never really pursued anyone. So all these people who were making parts for it, they just kept on going, and just changed the name and modified the frame by 2 millimeters. And Honda was like, oh, whatever, cool, we're on to the next thing. And meanwhile, that bike has stuck around. So when you see, those TikToks of like 10 Indian guys riding on a little motorcycle, that's still the CG125.
That's the bike.
Yeah, they're just such workhorses. And so Steve saw that platform, and he knew, I could build anything I need on this. All the parts are going to be available. There's a whole ecosystem built around it. And so, Steve, you started kind of talking back and forth with this factory, right, to kind of massage your design.
Yeah, as Ben said, it was a great platform to start. This frame was everywhere. And it was funny because I knew what I wanted to do with the frame, and I would contact them and I would say, great, let's make this wheel this size and this wheel this size. And they would come back and they were like, no, you can't do that. And I would like, just try it. And then they would go try it, and they'd come back and they'd be like, what a great idea. That looks great. And I'd be like, yeah. And then I'd be like, well, let's change these handlebars to this. And then they would fight me on, and I would just try it. And they would come back and say, oh, that really works. And so literally the entire scope of the bike, I changed the wheels, the brakes, the tires, the shocks, the forks, the speedo, the handlebar. Like I literally redesigned the whole bike except for essentially the frame.
The frame.
And in the end, it was funny because they kept fighting, and it changed the profile, and it changed the stance of the bike and the way you rode it and everything else. And they were they were tickled because they were basically handed this brand new design that
that was going to be
kind of
my
works.
next question, was copyright wise and innovation wise, you've taken them through a design process that you don't have any protection over, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's hard because it's like, a motorcycle's two wheels and a frame. It's been around for 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and our platform was starting on a frame that had pre-existed.
Yeah.
Right. So, in the end, there was a time, I think you can still go and sort of get one, but it's really not the same. Because what we ended up doing was, the things that really stood apart from us, the lesson learned was that I had to split up who was giving me what when.
Yes.
And so basically, this person didn't know, what controller, what tank, what frame, and then we did design some custom pieces that were exclusively to Beachman as well. And the people making those never saw where they were going. And it was what we had to do to keep ownership of
your IP. Yeah, years ago I was training innovation at Airbus, the airplane maker, and training them in like high-end problem solving innovation. And with it, they have, I don't know whether you've ever been in Europe and seen what they call the beluga, which is like a aircraft that carries parts around, looks a bit like a beluga. And with that plane, you don't have to get something like I can't remember the exact details, but some FAA sort of like, I don't know what the word is, authorization. You do, but like there's different levels of it because it's an experimental aircraft. And they can build, I think, 7 experimental aircraft or 9 or something. And it's a non-passenger plane because it carries parts. And when they would be doing something really tricky, they would manufacture that piece, in parts in different spots or in their own workshops. And then they would put that into that plane and they would test it in the beluga. They'd test these pieces and keeping out of a patented process at that point. So as soon as it goes in the public domain, it's patented process, it can be taken as such. And so they didn't necessarily want to patent something until they'd had time to ring fence the patent. So, spread the innovation out so that it contained it. And there was lots and lots of things that, of course, you can't do this on an aircraft. You can't put something in the air that carries people without everything being certified as such or meeting a certain standard, and then there's got to be redundant systems and all the rest. And so the guys at Boeing watch what the guys at Airbus do. The minute a patent goes in, they're looking at it, they're looking at what it does, how it's working, and vice versa. Like both the companies are constantly in this, I wouldn't say they're in an innovation race, but the market needs at least 2 players, like 2 big players. But always fascinates me, how you take an idea from idea to prototype, and prototype has so much knowledge in it, and then prototype to production is another jump of knowledge, and then first production to, I don't know, 5 years, again, has another jump of knowledge, and how critical that journey is.
And I'll say, Adrian, just a quick note on that whole intellectual property thing. To answer your question, which is yes, like I think within a month of us finishing our design and locking it in, we actually were contacted by a guy who, I won't say the brand name, but a dude who found us through Alibaba, because we found out that the moment Steve was like, okay, this is the bike, boom, it was on Alibaba with our logo on it for sale from that factory. It's like, wow, that was 2 years, 3 years of work for immediately getting sold down the river. So, that was a lesson we learned on day one. And, we had this thing where a person found our bike and had been working with an adjacent supplier who kept giving them our designs. And they were like, hey, this is Beachman. So they reached out to us and asked if they could work with us. And they ended up just going off and doing their own thing. And they're selling like the 2019 version of a Beachman in the States, which is, we could try to patent or go lawsuit or what. I don't. We've got the better bike, right? We're already now in the 2024 model, right? Because we
Yeah.
have been doing this pattern of innovating all along. And so, Steve's built this process where we're not trying to do it through litigation and
Uh-huh.
patents and stuff
It's
because it's really hard to protect, especially on
design
a simple
driven and
product.
first to market.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're just, we're setting up just really good operations instead. But yeah, so that I think that the fun story, and especially from my perspective, is so we have this prototype, they lock in the design, they put on Alibaba, and Steve's like, okay, let's order five. I'm like, wow, like not just one prototype. And he's like, well, think about it. If we have five bikes and they're kind of not that great, we could still sell them on Facebook Marketplace and at least recoup our money, right? Because we're paying the factory price. So they're going to be less than like someone else selling an e-bike on Marketplace. Think about it. Walk your head through
Yeah.
it. Do you think we
Yeah.
could sell it? And I'm like, yeah, of course we could.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Five bikes. So he goes to go order them. And then a couple days later, I'm at work and he calls me and he's like, hey, so I was thinking about this whole order thing and they're talking about prices and quantities and stuff. And, you think we could sell 15 bikes on Marketplace if they're, and I'm like, 15 bikes, eh? Wow, that's a big investment. We still haven't seen one. Steve's just operating off of sheets and numbers and understanding of parts. But I'm like, hey, man, I guess, right? It's this, there's 6 million people in this city, like 15 bikes. We could probably do it. It's not a crazy risk. It is a bit of one. And I'm like, okay, let's do 15 bikes. And Steve at this point had agreed he was going to pay for the first round of bikes on his home mortgage line of credit, which
Right.
this just shows the level of all in that we were in.
Steve, I just want to take a
And
pause and just say a shout out to Steve's wife there. Man, that woman's a believer. Whatever it is, you buy her flowers, you do something, man, because without her being, having your back, be a different story, wouldn't it?
No, it's true.
She's
She's
awesome.
behind us for everything. So it's awesome.
Yeah,
He's awesome.
no,
Here's to great
Liz is amazing.
partnerships. Yeah. Go,
Shout
sorry,
out to
I
Liz for
interrupted
sure.
there. Yeah.
Well, and also Liz. So Liz is the one who introduced us, right, through
Yeah.
Tom, our friend. And so Liz and Tom always joke that they're actually the original founders of Beachman and that they just connected us. But yeah.
I love it. They should be on the board of
Yeah.
directors, those guys.
Yeah. So anyway, so we're like, okay, we're gonna order 15 bikes. And then Steve calls me back the next day, goes, okay, I'm booking the shipment. They told me at that point, it's better to get a 20-foot shipping crate. They can fit 30 bikes in the crate. So I think we're I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is 5 to 15 to 30. It's your money, Steve. Like,
Yeah.
do you believe it? And he's like, yeah, it's a good bike.
So Steve,
we
at
ordered 30 bikes.
this point, you've got Ben's going to sell these things no matter what happens, and you're going to stump the cash for 30 bikes, and you may or may not receive these bikes. There's every chance that they're going to take your cash.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stories about guys getting a shipping container full of bricks.
Yeah. I know. This is what's going through my mind right now.
Yeah, it was in fact when I was first trying to source individual parts, that was what's turned it off for me because we came down to ordering the parts and they were like, okay, send us a wire transfer. And I was just kind of like, well, no, there's no protection in that. And they were just like, yeah, well, that's the only thing we'll do. And so I pulled the plug on that. Like I spent months compiling, right down to the last nut and bolts so that I would have it all. And they were just like, yeah, no, just wire the money. And I said no. And this new way, as Alibaba, for all its faults, it really does have a protection built in where they hold your money in trust until you say, I got the goods, it's what I was expecting. And that's the idea behind that platform.
Yeah.
Right. Is that, so you don't get a container full of bricks.
Holding it in escrow. Yeah.
Yeah. And it works. And, we're now off that platform. We now have direct relations with suppliers for everything we do. But in terms of starting out and, you know, mitigating that risk and at least knowing that you're just not throwing your money away, it was a great way to start, right?
So,
And I've had to file claims in which I've actually been refunded for
okay.
getting something that I didn't actually want or not receiving something at all. So it does work. It's heavily pitted against you, you know, but it does work. Yeah.
So did you guys ever look at using a platform like Kickstarter? You know, another crowdfunding platform to kick it off?
Yeah. So we did do that, Adrian. So before I get there, which we'll get there in a second, I just want to talk about the first 30 bikes again. So, you know, at this point in time, Adrian, for this entire 2 years, Steve and I have full-time jobs, right?
Yeah.
And we're just doing this on the side. So the bikes come, we unload them from the shipping crate by hand. We didn't have even a pallet jack yet. And we crack open one and we take it for a ride in the parking lot of like a storage mart.
Yeah.
And it was good. You know, it was as good as
It
we
worked.
hoped. And it worked. Steve's recipe it's the Steve recipe. It's great. It's excellent. It was a Beachman. So I took some photos of them and I put it up on Facebook Marketplace and I went to bed and I woke up the next day with 200 messages
No way.
asking to buy one.
No way.
And
you said,
I call
shit,
Steve,
Steve, we underordered.
yeah. Well, I call him and I'm like, oh, we sold the bike. And he's like, oh, that's great. You sold the bike. And I'm like, no. We sold them all. They're all going to go now. And yeah, so, you know, we start preparing for that, but it's going to be some time. They were all partially assembled. So we're going to have to build each one by one. And, you know, customers want to come and test ride it and stuff before they actually buy it. So our initial business model was we meet people down at this place called Cherry Beach on the edge of Toronto and down by the water on Saturdays. And I go down there with my FJ Cruiser with a bike on the back on like a big motorbike rack. And people would come down and do test drives. They'd sign a little waiver on my iPad. And then if they liked it, they'd pay me on a little square thing.
On a square,
and then the next day, so that night, Steve would build a bike. And then the next day on Sunday, I'd go and deliver it to their house. And that was how we operated. And as we started selling them, my dad sat me down and he goes, okay, listen, this is working. This is a business. You need to order 100 right now. And this was in, I think, like April of 2021. And so we order 100. And again, on Steve's line of credit, once again, shout out to Liz for taking the huge risk on that second one.
I want to talk
over
to Liz.
$200,000. Yeah. Adrian, that was when we did turn to crowdfunding. So we went, okay, we got 100 bikes on order. We can't really sell anymore, but we could do it in Indiegogo and pre-sell them. So I got in touch with this agency called Agency 2.0, run by this guy, Jonathan, the super great guy. He was involved in the first big Indiegogo, which was Saunders e-bikes.
Yep.
And we ran a campaign. Steve built a prototype of the 64, which is our current production model. He built that on the base of the bike where, you know, there was the first two generations were built in China by that factory. And then we went, okay, moving forward, let's start ordering our parts. Let's start building them in Canada. And so Steve builds a prototype of the 64. I put it on the back of the FJ and I drive all the way across Canada to Vancouver to meet up with all my old film school buddies and shoot a commercial. And so we do that over the space of a week. We come back, we edit the thing, and then by August of that same year, where we had just done the first 30 bikes, we ran that campaign and we did $100,000 in the first day, and I think over 300 grand in the month.
Boom.
And then it was like, okay, yeah, we have a business. We got 400 grand in the bank. We got like 200 bikes ordered and on the way. And so Steve and I quit our jobs and we took out a lease. Boom, done. Yeah. So quit our jobs, but we took out a lease on a coffee shop and set up a little retail store doing, you know, coffee and motorcycles.
Yep.
And
cafe races.
From cafe racers, exactly. And my brother was a professional coffee roaster, so he set us up with our own custom coffee blend, and we had it running in the machines, and just created this really nice space.
I'd like to thank Stetson Hats Australia for providing my amazing collection of open road Stetson hats. Since 1865, John B. Stetson has been crafting legendary headwear, adorning the heads of Western icons like Annie Oakley and George Custer. The open road hat debuted in 1937, beloved by artists, outlaws, presidents alike. Its timeless style fits the setting from city streets to open plains. Whether in the cab of a truck or my trusty Mini Cooper, the open road is all style. If you think hats aren't for you, you just haven't found the right one yet. Discover yours at stetsonaustralia.com or stetson.com if you're in the USA. Thanks, Stetson, for your support. Please share your Stetson moment by emailing me your photo to talkdesign@gmail.com. Let's celebrate the timeless allure of Stetson together.
And that was kind of how we ran for just over a year. And that was when we got into a nice rhythm of things and started figuring out orders. We did have a year, Adrian, where, do you remember when the bike got stuck, or the ship was stuck in the Suez Canal?
Oh, really? Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
That,
Yeah.
you know, it was so funny. It's all the memes about it and everything.
Yeah.
That
That
screwed our business over. I know Steve.
Yeah, that would make a big difference, say, like all of a sudden not having any ability to get hold of anything really makes it kills your cash flow, does everything all at the same time.
Yeah, we had a period. Exactly. We had a period. It was just in our second year, our first real year of business. We had no inventory for 8 months, and we were paying rental space on a retail store and a warehouse to store these 200 bikes that we have ordered. And we're paying our salaries and an employee that we hired to handle this demand, and just nothing is coming. And they were delaying them 2 weeks at a time. They'd call Steve and they'd be like, "Hey, you're on the next boat." And then a day before it ships, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're on the next boat again. It's gonna be another 2 weeks." They did that for 8 months. And so we got in a pretty really dangerous position where that 400 grand we had raised just trickled away over the year. But we somehow, I honestly, Adrian, looking back, I have no idea how we did it, but we made it through that year, and we got the bikes and sold them. And I remember there was a point when we were surviving off of the HST payments that we would collect, the tax payments on the bikes. But, you know, it's what you have to do as a small business, right? And we were...
I was going to say, I think those stories like that, every small business has something like that at some point. And the big thing is if it's early enough, it teaches you the lesson so that it doesn't happen later to you when it's, you know, when it can really sink a lot of things. You know, at the end of the day, you know, I suppose if it had all gone really to custard, you'd have all been paying Steve's mortgage, and you would have been doing that from jobs that you had, and one team member, employee, would have ended up getting another job, and you would have been, you know, fighting to not pay your lease or whatever it is, you know, like you would have found a way through that. That containerized thing was like just such a, I want to say a joke. It wasn't a funny joke. You know, I know companies here in Australia that they had things on order, and basically if they wouldn't pay extra to have them shipped, so they'd have a confirmed order with a container sitting full, and the container would go from, you know, $5,000 to $7,000. And then they'd go, yeah, okay, we'll pay the $7,000. And then it would go to $9,000, and it would just sit on the dock until they agreed to pay a price that was just being jacked on them daily or weekly.
So that container, sorry, you Steve, you can.
No, I was going to say, I was trying to bribe somebody. I was begging for somebody, like whose pocket can I grease to get my container on a boat? Like at that point, we needed it to move.
Yeah.
And the price we ended up paying for that one container was high.
Yeah.
It was stupid high. But
Yeah.
yeah, but waiting was worse. So
Oh yeah, waiting. There's no joy or no outcome in waiting. Or not keeping pushing, not keeping the pressure on it. What a great story. It's like, I love it. And so now tell me today what the distribution looks like and how it happens, and what happens with Beachman from today. If today I said I want a bike.
well, now the coffee shop we ended up closing. It just wasn't big enough.
Uh-huh.
And the warehouse that we were renting, so we were subleasing space from
Sure.
other companies, friends, good acquaintances and stuff. So that, and we were limited on space on that. And we realized to have the operation we really wanted to have here, we needed not only really good production space, because we build the bikes here in Canada,
Sure.
right? We still
Yeah.
import most of the parts. Some are built here, but we needed our own office where like at the very least Ben and I were sort of being able to connect face to face, because so much of our business was remote. It was like one was in the coffee shop, one was in the warehouse, or we were at home talking on phones. It was like almost every day we'd end up just with a phone call at the end of the day, just to keep in touch type
Yeah.
thing. So we ended up in the same sort of complex we were with our original warehouse. We now have our own designated warehouse space where we have enough for large scale storage as well as multiple build areas. And we have office just where we can, where Ben and I both are right now, where we can, do our day-to-day business and type thing. And so we've turned into a very large scale operation, but it's the most efficient we've ever been type thing. Ben? Oh, I think he froze again.
I think he froze. So in the day-to-day operations of the business, who does what, Steve?
I wear two hats. I'm obviously design. Like we've got a new bike design, which we'll get there in a minute. But yeah, I spend half my day in the office, just coming up with design, dealing with sourcing the parts and locating and logistics and all that stuff. Basically, it's generally I'm responsible for getting everything into the warehouse from wherever in the world it's coming from. and the design of such. The other half of it is just like like an hour before we were talking, I was down putting turn signals on a customer's bike that needed had two broken signals and needed a new headlight type thing. So it's very much I'm wearing those two hats from day to day depending on what is needed,
right?
Type thing. Ben is doing what Ben does, which is the marketing. And the giant umbrella that comes with that, with the Beachman Life and the Instagrams, and now we're about to launch a new Indiegogo campaign for the new model bike.
Yeah, okay, cool. Out. Yeah, awesome. Well, that's going to be good then. So then, tell me how with the marketing, Ben, that you kind of went. Well, tell me the marketing story. Obviously, Beachman Life and that platform, but you don't throw motorbikes. Well, you do put motorbikes on there, but you don't, it's not like it's a sales platform for you.
No. Yeah. So Beachman Life is maintained as, it's my personal page, right? It's not like company owned.
Yeah.
Obviously it's related and it retains the name that it's had for, the 8 years that I've been doing it. But yeah, the brand is larger than any one thing. It's not just riding motorcycles or watches or whatever. It's about a way of life, right? As I said before, it's like the retired James Bond. I used to say that like our customer, we call them the casual professional. It's about a person who works really hard, but they take their play as seriously as their work, right? They do interesting things in their time off, and what we do at Beachman is create products that make those interesting times more fun and easier. And so I've just always, kept true to that. I like the brands that I really respect are the ones that understand who they are from the beginning and they don't change, right? Because, it's interesting. I feel like with brands, people are addicted to change, especially now. But the reality is that as old as humankind is, it only has like a 60-year-old memory, right? Because everyone lives
Yeah.
and dies, and a
Yeah.
brand that remains eternal is just as special to someone who's new to this world as someone who, existed in the previous time, right? And I think that you see that a lot with like car brands and stuff. Like for me, the ones I've always looked up to are like Porsche, Herman Miller,
Sure.
Ray-Ban.
Yeah.
They have a secret sauce, and they don't mess with it.
The Eames
And so,
chairs, Eames, like, design. There's these, as you
mhm.
say, there's a secret sauce that they don't mess with, and they set a set of values around it, without a doubt.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I've always been focused on. It's about a life well lived, and as long as we keep that as the core principle, when it comes to us making new product ideas, like the answers are so clear, right? It's like, and sometimes we get a little distracted and we'll do stuff, but then we realize like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be making this, flashy, interesting thing. Let's just make a surfboard mount for the bike,
Yeah.
right? Let's just go back to the basics of what are we actually doing here? What are we providing people? So yeah, so in terms of marketing overall, Adrian, like I try to keep that consistent to a certain degree as well with the more like corporate side of things. That aesthetic
Mm.
and lifestyle is always present. You can really see it on the website and the way we film our video
Yeah.
marketing and stuff. And we just hired a new employee in marketing. And a thing I've been kind of drilling into our conversations is that when we go and we shoot a Beachman commercial, nothing is fake, right? It's still my buddies from film
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
We're still just going out to California and just having fun on the beach. And we stopped filming for a bit, so everyone would just rip around on the bikes. And
Yeah.
people can tell. They know it bleeds through, right? When you're enjoying yourselves, when you're authentically like living. And it's funny. I feel like that word authentic has almost been kind of hijacked
Yeah,
lately to mean
yeah,
something else,
totally.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But when you're
transparency.
doing
Yeah.
the thing, people know, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's really where my mind always comes back to. It's just like what's fun for us, you know, what lines up with this life we want to live. And I think that's why Steve and I get along, right? It's like he's doing the Beachman thing for 30 years before we met, right?
Yeah.
And there's almost nothing original that we're doing, and it's actually the opposite. It's an act of preservation, right? So
I
yeah,
like
I just
that.
keep focusing on those things that we know are great, and keep them alive. And obviously we're ingesting all these modern things like this
Of course.
amazing new electric technology, but the
Yeah.
fundamentals are the same.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think a good example, and it's funny, we've been talking about this all day. We're gonna do a marketing project in the fall, Adrian. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you this. So what we're working on right now is a video where we have a professional ride a beachman out the back of an airplane over the desert in Arizona
Yeah. I love
and
it.
film them. That moment of glory that I'm trying to capture is where when they first come out of the plane and they're just looking like, what the
The
hell am I doing right
fuck
now?
is this? Yeah. Like,
Yeah,
how far's the
this is
ground?
amazing. Yeah, exactly. And
You
so,
almost need it to
it's
be
fun.
like a
Like,
Steve McQueen kind of character who's looking back over their shoulder, gunning it, and then going from the inside, and it's just launching, all faith,
exactly.
all faith. Yeah.
Well, ironically, that's actually the safest way to exit the aircraft is full gun,
Yeah,
right?
I
So you,
bet.
you get
You want
good
to be
clearance.
well clear.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's like that's the reason we're doing this is because it's hilarious and fun, and everyone has this reaction when I tell them. And for us it's like a gift for the staff to be able to do something amazing like this, right?
Yeah.
And to transition from the crazy idea to okay, how do we do this safely and effectively, and what is the budget and all those
Yeah.
steps, right?
Yeah.
But then we get to film it and share it with everyone in a way that it's not contrived, it's not there's no jargon being used, right? There's not going to be like a Steve McQueen character. It's just going to be a guy, some professional skydiver. Part of the video will be an interview with this guy, right? Of like, what does it take to do this? Walk us through this process of actually, doing this weird moment, right? And then, what is the aftermath of that? So yeah, I think that's always the structure for marketing is we find these interesting things, we go do them, and then we make, ways to share it, whether it be photos or videos, and
Yeah.
keep it very
Waste.
simple.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
but
I
honestly, Adrian, the bottom line for our marketing is for the past 2 years is we haven't really done any. We've never really spent money on advertising. It's almost entirely word of mouth that Beachman has spread. So
yeah, cool. That's so cool. That's really, really cool. You know, because that is the strongest thing. So I've got a friend who hasn't come on the podcast yet, but he makes fry pans, and he's a good friend. He used to make knives, like cooking knives and stuff. Blew up a big company in America. So he's Australian, but blew up a big company in America, working with Rachel Ray and all these kinds of people. And who's Oprah's like protege, he sold that company off, and then he came back to us. Well, pre coming back to Australia, he started making fry pans like out of cast iron to start with, then wrought iron, and then stainless steel and wrought iron. Now he does knives again as well. And he did it all on Kickstarter. And so for people who are looking and they're hearing this, if you look up Solid Technics, that's the brand I'm talking about. But he did it all on Kickstarter, and he has what he calls a lovers group. And the Kickstarter, that's why I asked you about Kickstarter earlier, was really quite early days in crowdfunding when he pushed it out. And from that, he created a Facebook group that was the lovers group. And then he gave them special editions. He did just different things from that. And now they have this, big business in America and in Australia where they're the people who purchase, say, like on Kickstarter, they are your backers and they are funding you going forward. Couple of things that happened there. He was in profit from the first quarter, which is really important. And then beyond being in profit from the first quarter, he talks to a group of people who believe he's got the only product in the world. There isn't another fry pan. There isn't anything else. If you don't have this, then you're not, again, that I want to call it that casual professional, like you said with the customer. They're part of the story and the history, and they created a cookbook together. And so I look at what you've done and I go, the same kind of thing. You've got all these people aligned with the Beachman lifestyle that whether they buy a bike or not, they're aligned to your success with it. And I think it's
mhm.
it's a powerful marketing genre. And we said before about authentic, but it is an authentic. It's not like just an idea. It's an authentic movement. And you made the comment, a better life well lived is this constant thing that's sitting in the background, that this is what we need to do every step. The vision is clear, because does it equal a better life well lived? And just having that
Yeah.
clarity. And as the preservation piece that you said as well, it's an act of preservation, of taking those old things and dragging them into this new space, or positioning them in this new space for people who want those security of those old values, and then delivering on those values. I think it's
And that Adrian is Steve's greatest design challenge is that, he's constantly innovating, but he has to make his innovations invisible, right?
yeah,
They need to blend in with this old stuff. Like he's been doing this. So this new bike we have called the Aviator that's coming out, and
yeah,
we're designing the side paneling for it right now. And it's this process of making it look old
yeah,
and new at the same time,
yeah.
which has been fascinating to watch. Most of those conversations I try to take as much of a backseat as possible and just say like, yeah, no, this is my thoughts, but it really is between Steve and our designer Oleg. Shout out to Oleg, he's great. Steve, do you want to talk more about that?
The Aviator. Yeah, it's basically it's the Aviator is kind of speaks back to when we were originally coming up with the bike design. If I could, pull it straight out of my head, what would we do? And ironically enough, it actually kind of calls more to Bike Zero, the
Oh,
first
right.
prototype that we had. It was funny. I think it was a week or two ago. We actually, when we were setting up the build space, we put, one of the 64s up, and then we put the prototype for the Aviator up, and then we put Bike Zero all three next to each other, and you could actually see that,
The
where,
DNA
you know,
and
yeah,
the
just
I
kind
love
of,
it.
the full circle of where it came around, type
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, but yeah, the Aviator, we're trying to, in a nutshell, we're trying to come up with really creative solutions for, electric motorcycles in general, but still paying homage to, the original old school sort of
Well,
design.
the
And
calf
then,
racer.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, there's some things that share like looks or personality with the 64, and some things we've branched away from a little bit, or took a bit of a different view on. But it's also, like real world problems today, just like, theft and
Sure.
things
Sure.
to do with, batteries and things like that, and trying to come up with ways to have a cool new design, but also sort of deal with, real world problems of, theft is probably one of the biggest ones.
Yeah,
But,
right. Yeah, okay. Theft's huge for it, is it?
yeah, and even just battery theft. It's just like, if they can't take the bike, they'll take the battery. So a lot of the design is like, how do we put that into the bike without anybody even realizing that it's, there's
Yeah.
3 locks holding that battery, and that
Yeah.
you don't even see, sort
If
of
you're
thing.
gonna steal
So,
it, don't steal the whole bike. Like
yeah.
it's that thing. I remember years ago, so I worked in the clothing trade, and I was I was talking to the guys at it was Burberry, and so Burberry coats, Burberry, the brand. And I was in London, and I was talking to the guys at Burberry, and they were telling me about how people used to go into Harrods and stores like that, and they would steal the Burberry label out of the back of a jacket. So they'd cut it out. They'd cut the just clip it on either side and take that, because the Burberry label was like, if you couldn't afford the coat or the jacket, you at least had a label you could stick on something. And so Burberry went, you know what? Because they were getting all these things back to get repaired, and to do it in the lining, you got to open the lining anyway. We won't go into how. So they decided that what they would do is they would, whilst they'd sew it, they would also glue it onto the lining. And the problem became that people just cut the lining out. And so the garment was totally destroyed. There was no comeback for the garment whatsoever. So again, it was this thing. Why would somebody steal that? For the status of having it, yes. And do you remember when people were stealing like the Mercedes Benz and all the hood ornaments off cars? Exactly.
Yeah.
And you go, this thing is like, how do you stop this? You've created a brand point where people want something, and that's stealing a brand point, but you're destroying something along the way. And it'd be better if they just stole the car and drove off in it, or stole the coat and wore the damn thing. At least there'd be.
Adrian, I'd love to segue off of something you're saying right now. Just talk
Yep,
about kind of another one
absolutely.
of our values. So, that idea of stealing the logo, right? And that people want it for status. That's something that, I struggled with a lot in the beginning of figuring out, what is Beachman and what are the values. And I think I would describe it when I was younger as like the anti-Gucci, that it isn't about Gucci. You buy it because it has the stripes and it says Gucci, right?
Yep.
And how it looks is secondary, because it's going to look good enough. It's a designer piece, but it really is about that ability to, for better or worse, look down on other people, right? Or to stand above them, one could say. And I think that what we do is the opposite, right? That we're building is a product first for enhancing your life. And that, it's funny, I'm thinking now, I didn't mention this before, but one of the things that connects you down under to us is we're doing a big partnership this year with Blundstone.
Yeah, right. Nice.
It's a brand that has totally taken over Canada, as well as obviously back home. And
Yep.
Blundstone's a great example, because you can cut the tags off of a Blundstone and everyone knows what it is.
It's still a Blundstone,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And it's cut the label out. The value of the boot doesn't change, right? Because the value is in the boot. It's not in the
label.
Yeah, exactly. And the mystique around it and everything. And we really feel the same with Beachman. Like, we were talking about design philosophy in the early days about the bike, and like, should we put an app? Should we have a phone charger? And what Steve and I kept going back to is like, no, this bike should be like a power drill. It just works. You just
Yep.
turn it on. Like that's what Milwaukee is, right? It's just they're the
Uh-huh.
best tool. And you
Yeah.
buy it, sure it's red, but it's that's why you
But
get
you
them. And
turn it
so
on, it's got value, it's reliable, it does what it's
yeah,
meant to do, it rides well, it's safe, it does all those things,
we're
and
gonna stand
enjoy
behind
your
it.
life. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And
I love
yeah,
that.
so it was nice for us to be able to partner with Blundstone. I actually have, I'll show you this for the
Yeah,
podcast.
100%.
Uh, I got like 6 cords of shoe leather here with me, and we're building 11 bikes for Blundstone. Steve's got the tags there
Yeah,
for
I
the shoe.
saw it. Yeah.
So we're doing custom bikes. We're doing gas tanks with the Blundstone branding
Uh-huh.
all custom painted on them, and then we're upholstering our seats in boot leather and putting the tag on the back. And
Nice.
then they're going to get those bikes and give them away. And then for the rest of the fall of this year, people who buy Beachmans will get a free pair of Blundstones with their bike, right?
Awesome.
Which we're super happy about because that's like the ideal kind of marketing promotion for me is for the customer. You're just getting way more value and you're getting 2 great products, right? It's not some fancy thing or a
I
discount.
100
It's like,
Yeah, 100% agree. It's like there's no, I want to say, fakery in it. It's real stuff.
mhm.
It drives you in a direction. I just recently got a sponsorship from Stetson Australia, and I wear them on the TV show that I host. And with it, it's like I could have got a dozen different hats. In fact, I had people saying to me, "Oh, I've worn Stetsons for years," but saying to me, and I went, "No, no, I'm going to reach out to Stetson because of the fact that Stetson is, the world's oldest, well, not maybe oldest hat maker, but big commercial hat maker, and their values are the same every year. They don't, they just do what they do, and they do it well. They've got high quality." That just all that kind of thing. Again, it's got a history of a story that hasn't been lost in the years, since the 1800s, that this is what they're about. And I love that with,
Mhm.
what you guys are doing as well. I've got a last question, which is, where does Beachman go next? Is it like, small aircraft or something like that? What's in the Beachman A Better Life Well Lived
Oh
beyond
man,
beyond the motorcycle?
the $1 million question that we talk about every day.
The
Yeah.
beach, the
You
beach
know, it,
buggy,
yeah. I
the
mean,
Manx,
but we built a Manx, right?
yeah.
An electric one. We've talked a lot about it, Adrian, and I think that right now, most importantly, where we're going is in the direction of scale and professionalism.
Hmm.
We're going to be moving into North America and eventually into Europe. I'd say that our next big move is after we establish an American presence here, we're going to build a second facility in France that assembles bikes there and provide for the European market. So that's our main focus is on growth more than a continuous
Yeah,
expansion
right.
of products,
Hmm.
because as you said, it's focus is important. But yeah, when I first dreamed up Beachman, I, years before Steve, years before the bikes, I pictured a store where you go in there and it's, it smells like sandalwood and there's like beautiful stuff on the shelves, like leather jackets and cool shirts and phone cases and keychains, like just interesting everyday things. And I always dreamed about having the Beachman parachute for sale there. Not even as a thing that you would actually go in and buy, but people would be like, yeah, I buy my coat at the James Bond store, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, on Savile
I think
Row.
that was definitely the initial dream. And I think, when I compare that to other existing brands, I think the closest thing to that would be Muji. You familiar with them, the Japanese brand?
How do you spell it?
Muji.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. So they
Yep,
have these stores, right, where they have a pretty wide range of goods, but they have basically one of everything. And it is
yep,
designed in the Muji image. The Muji,
yep,
they're a home goods brand. So it's like the toothbrush, just
yep,
one, right?
yep.
They have the oil diffuser, they have a backpack, a broom. And they're all perfect and to this, incredible Japanese aesthetic. And I think that was my initial vision. But I think now as we grow, I'm really focusing more on creating this global bike first as a status, right? Like it's like Porsche, you need the 911, right? We have to have something that we
Yeah.
can anchor and stand around. And then we're going to continue to grow products definitely further into like clothing, lifestyle, accessories. We're gonna be doing some interesting things. Like I'm designing. I play a lot of cards. I play a lot of euchre and poker in my spare time. My friends and I. That's our thing to do. Go out on a dock in the sun, drink some Negronis, and play some cards. And so we're doing a pack of Beachman cards that are going to be like the way I've always wanted. Certain games you keep score with certain cards. So we're going to
Yeah.
design them to be a little different.
And some
But
casino chips, I hope. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, it's there's opportunities to expand those little ways. And then it's funny you said like, I mean, the big ways that Steve and I dream is like, dude, electric planes, hell yeah. Like if we had the
Yeah.
resources,
Yeah.
expanding into these other ways of human transport, especially light craft, like these similar kind of ideas, making the entry level products like we're already doing with the bikes.
Yeah.
And then the one thing that we've been toying with for a while that, we tease people with a lot is, so we've been doing electric car conversions, and we've been talking a lot about, I don't know if you're familiar with Factory 5 or Superformance. They're these American brands that build
No.
Ford-based kit cars,
Cool.
Shelby Cobras, Ford GTs. They build
Yeah.
the chassis,
Okay.
the body,
Yep.
but they don't sell the engine. You put a Mustang engine in or whatever.
Yep.
But there is this ability, for us if we grow enough to essentially start mass producing electric Shelby Cobras, something like that, where we
Nice.
can,
Yeah.
they're not going to be we're not going to be making thousands, but something, just incredible like that, where we get to make our dream race car.
Yeah.
I think that would be fun. But yeah, I think the general roadmap is just fulfill our dreams like we're already doing now, right? There's a long list of things we'd like to be doing. And while in the short term, we're definitely focused on understanding the fundamentals of the business and growing it. I think we'll just continue to listen to our customers and see what works and what doesn't, and continuously edge out the boundaries of like what is inside Beachman and what does that mean?
100%. I love that part there where you said, continue to fulfill your dreams. You're actually igniting dreams in others, and you're helping them also, other people, fulfill their dreams, like your can-do attitude, you take the risk, you're, all in, and then being able to stay true to what makes your, heart sing, what the passions are, and you're prepared to do the work that it takes to actually create that as well. And for some people, they're never going to get into that space to do it, but they can have a piece of it and they can have authenticity, they can come on that journey. You're giving them an opportunity that way. I love the brand, like with Blundstone, doing the brand association thing as well, and bringing two good products together that make something even more special. And I always think that there's, a million great brands that with collaboration, you can create fantastic things, and just a
Yeah,
little bit of fun along the way to do that is, makes
Adrian,
life
I
worth
think
living.
you just put it perfectly, man. I think that's exactly what a future looks like for us. So.
Ah, man, I want to come on that shoot, by the way, where you throw people out the back of the plane.
There's a long line.
Yeah. Seriously, keep me in touch with anything that you're doing with that. And we'll talk again. And as you do things, we'll put a podcast out around them, because I think it's fantastic and it inspires people to take action and to, look at what's possible. And we didn't even get into what you've done with the, with the Instagram and the other part of the marketing. But seriously, guys, hats off to you guys and what you're doing. And I think that thing, it just summed it up for me. I put it big letters on my pad here, a better life well lived is the key statement that you come back to. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Adrian.
Hey,
Thank you.
Steve. Thanks, Ben. Take care. Have an awesome evening. I'm getting into my day, and I will be in touch. And for all our listeners, we will give you all the details on these guys, how to find them, how to find their bikes, where to buy them, whatever's happening from that piece. It'll be all posted with the podcast.
Amazing.
Excellent.
Appreciate it, guys. Have an
Cool,
excellent day. And yeah, look forward to seeing you again.
Likewise. Thank you for tuning into our conversation. I hope it left you both informed and inspired. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen. And please don't hesitate to share your design thoughts with me. It's always a joy to hear from you. If you're like me and crave a deeper dive into design thinking, coupled with a love for travel and adventure, consider one of my architectural adventures. Join me and some of my wonderful design friends and embark on a journey of a lifetime. Apply for an unforgettable design experience at adrianramsey.com. With our clients spanning the globe, I firmly believe behind every great project are great people. If you're a great person and seeking to turn your dream into a reality, I'd be honored to design your home with you. Why not join the ranks of our exceptional clients? And let's make your heart sing. Reach out to me at studio@ardesignhouse.com. That's studio@ardesignhouse.com. And let's get a conversation going and make your heart sing.